It is 10 to 9. The synthetic opioid fentanyl is behind a growing public health crisis in the United States. It's 50 times stronger than heroin. It was responsible for tens of thousands of overdose deaths in the US last year. It's potent, it's very easy to produce. It's increasingly attractive to the Mexican cartels who smuggle the drugs across the US border. And last week, Mexico's president said he's introducing a new law to make it illegal to take fentanyl, but that could be too late for Mexican border cities like Tijuana, which finds itself in the middle of a deadly fentanyl boom, as Will Grant reports.
Tijuana's fire service hasn't had a quiet night in months. Around 1 a.m. on a freezing winter night, they're called out to La Perla, a local bar. But there's no blaze to put out. Rather, they're tackling another crisis spreading through the city like wildfire: fentanyl. At the bar, 2 men are unconscious, apparently clinging to life by a thread. It is a shocking scene unfolding in front of me. 2 men sprawled out on the floor, both overdosing. The paramedics trying to resuscitate them. The police are obviously on the scene. The longer the minutes go past, the less likelihood there is of a positive outcome. The paramedics administer Narcan, the most effective drug to reverse a fentanyl overdose. The men may not have even realised they were taking fentanyl. As it's so cheap and so powerful, the Mexican cartels have started to cut it into recreational drugs like cocaine. Tijuana is in the grip of a full-blown drug epidemic.
Aquí nosotros no producimos fentanilo.
Recently, though, Mexico's president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, denied the problem even exists.
Y nosotros no tenemos consumo de fentanilo.
We don't produce fentanyl here, we don't consume fentanyl here, he said, urging the US to take care of the problem on its side of the border. The State Forensic Service disagrees. In a study on all of the bodies which enter Tijuana's morgue, last July they found a staggering 1 in 3 contained fentanyl. Preven Casa is a harm reduction centre in Tijuana which runs a needle exchange and other services for addicts. So this is the vial, this is what it came in. The heroin or the drugs came in.
Así es.
Okay. In front of me, its director, Lily Pacheco, selected 2 used needles and 2 used drug vials at random. All 4 pieces of drug paraphernalia tested positive for fentanyl. The border is flooded with it, she says.
Esa es la falta del reconocimiento de una realidad.
It's a lack of recognition of this reality. Of course fentanyl exists. I know the president said it doesn't, but we have the evidence right here. And the overdoses we see and all those who've died from fentanyl overdoses are part of that evidence too. Ignoring the problem won't solve it. On the contrary, people will keep dying from this.
The roughest part of Tijuana is around the city's canal, where homeless people, including many recently deported migrants, make shelter under bridges and in storm drains. As church volunteers give out a hot meal and donated clothing, the mental health and drug addiction problems here are rife. Irma, a recovering heroin addict who grew up in the US but lives in a tent on Tijuana's streets, says fentanyl has made a bad situation worse.
It's mixed on crystal, it's mixed on everything, even on the weed. They put a little dust on it and it kills them because they haven't used that before.
Overdoses, I imagine you see them all the time.
Every day. Every day. I try to save their lives when I can, but sometimes they call me when it's too late. Real hard for me when I can't bring them back.
Don't move. What do you need? ¿Hablas español?
Back at La Perla bar, it took 3 doses of Narcan, but the paramedics managed to bring one of the 2 men back from the brink. His friend, however, wasn't so fortunate. He died amid the beer bottles and empty glasses on the barroom floor. His family, including his mother, has arrived and been told the news. At 27, he's another victim of this most potent of narcotics, the latest young person to overdose on fentanyl without even knowing he was taking it.
That was Will Grant reporting from the Mexican side of the border. He'll report from the American side, the US side of the border, on the PM programme at 5.
Now, it's an election year in the US, as you know, and in Mexico too. And there's one issue that links those two countries, the synthetic opioid fentanyl. In the US, tens of thousands of overdose deaths are caused by it each year. It's likely to be a major campaign issue. The presidential candidates will attack each other for failing to tackle the crisis. But in truth, it's impossible or almost impossible to stop the drug crossing the 2,000-mile-long shared border with Mexico. US teenagers are increasingly being exposed to fentanyl through counterfeit versions of medications like Percocet and OxyContin. Will Grant reports now from El Paso in Texas and its neighbouring city in Mexico, Ciudad Juárez.
A video of Elijah Gonzalez on his 15th birthday shows a friendly-looking, slightly camera-shy teenager surrounded by his family. In others, he's playing American football for his school team in El Paso, Texas, or his big passion, in the kitchen, learning to cook.
Okay, we got some veggies.
Just a few months after that birthday, Elijah died of a fentanyl overdose, another life cut short by the potent synthetic opioids sweeping across the United States.
I miss him every day. He was going to graduate this June. A piece of me died the day that he died.
Elijah's mother, Nelly Morales, tells me he wasn't a drug taker, but studious and sporty. Text messages suggest the night he died was his first time experimenting with drugs, when he took what he thought was a Xanax pill with his best friend and his best friend's sister. But it was a counterfeit pill from Mexico, produced by the cartels and laced with fentanyl. His body simply couldn't cope. Within the year, says Nelly, both the best friend and his sister were also dead from accidental fentanyl overdoses.
I never saw it coming. You know, a lot of parents tell me, oh, my son is in football, my son's in band, and my son's not in that crowd. I'm like, well, neither was mine. And I had no idea.
Are you angry at Elijah?
No, I'm not angry. I've never been angry. Not even at the person that gave my son drugs. I forgave her. I'm just angry that it happened to me. I'm angry at just the situation itself.
Fentanyl struck our family a little over 2 years ago when my son...
Such deaths aren't rare in America. More than 5 Texans die every day from fentanyl, state authorities say, and the governor, Greg Abbott, recently launched the One Pill Kills campaign, intended to increase public awareness.
One pill definitely kills. It's really a matter of life and death.
In El Paso County alone, fentanyl was involved in 85% of accidental overdoses like Elijah's.
Do you need the ambulance?
Activists from San Francisco to Pittsburgh have documented dire scenes of fentanyl addiction taking hold of U.S. cities.
Well, let me call the ambulance for you.
In El Paso, Police Sergeant Robert Gomez likens the situation to the crack epidemic of the 1980s.
It's hard to judge when so many people are dying in the crack epidemic, and today, the only thing I do know is that we have to do something to stop the needless killing of our citizens.
But it is ultimately up there. It's a comparable.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe different circumstances on how it was created, but definitely the bottom line, the number of deaths, the number of addiction, the number of costs to society is, I would say, is very comparable to the epidemic of the 80s.
El Paso sits across the border from Ciudad Juárez, one of Mexico's most dangerous cities. As we recorded, customs officers seized 33 kilos of fentanyl in a single day, enough to kill everyone in El Paso twice over. I'm crossing the border crossing between El Paso and Ciudad Juárez, and next to me is a very, very long line of cars stretching right back deep into the Mexican border town. There's a steady stream of people walking over the footbridge into the United States. And of course, somewhere in amongst these vehicles and those people is almost undoubtedly a quantity of fentanyl. It is essentially impossible to stop the flow of the drug into the United States. It's not just being smuggled over ground. In Juárez, we met Kevin, a 17-year-old drug trafficker and cartel hitman, who showed me videos of his gang moving the drug through tunnels underneath the US-Mexico border. A kilo of uncut fentanyl makes the cartel around $200,000, he says, but I earn about $1,000 to take it north. Cheap to produce and easy to smuggle, fentanyl is the future of the illegal drug trade, he says.
Whoa!
Last year, a grassroots organisation of bereaved relatives called Lost Voices of Fentanyl turned out in Washington, D.C. to demand the Biden administration do more to combat fentanyl. In truth, though, it may already be too late. Bipartisan legislation may help tackle money laundering by organised crime in China and Mexico, but fentanyl is already flowing into the US at an alarming rate, fast becoming the most lethal drug epidemic in US history.
Will Grant reporting there from each side of the US-Mexican border.